But people do say Trump is the greatest president.
Because they're idiots. They don't know anything.
I know.
It's stupid. It's like saying, I don't know what that's like saying. It's stupid. But so for those of you who don't, I'm not a Lincoln expert. Oh, excuse me. Let me start over. Going to the edge on a short topic, but there seems to be a controversy around the value of Abraham Lincoln and the people who honored him with his face upon Mount Rushmore and the Lincoln Memorial. They did that for a reason. Prior to 1960, when the Civil War began, he split two parties, the Whigs and the Democrats, and formed what was called the Republicans, naming the Republican Party as his party. He was an abolitionist. Ultimately, he became an abolitionist. The Lincoln-Douglas debates were all about abolition. And in 1850, abolition became a big cry. What happened in 1850 was the slave hunters. There were gangs of people running all over this country because of the fugitive slave law. The fugitive slave law in 1850 said the slaves could be chased all the way to the Canadian border, to the sea, from west to east and east to west, and all the way to the south to Mexico. And the slaves would not be safe. They would have to be hunted down and brought back to the plantation. Those poor plantation owners, they had to have those slaves. You know, they had to have that free market of not paying for workers, paying very little. They had to have that. Well, Lincoln debated Douglas in those debates again and again and again why abolition was a necessity. But it wasn't until a gal by the name of Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin. Sounds like an innocent book, except that she went from Connecticut down to Cincinnati, Ohio. And she's important in terms of Lincoln because eventually, when her book got to be famous about seeing the slaves running across the Ohio River when it was frozen solid, avoiding dogs chasing them on foot, carrying babies, and sometimes the ice cracking, and the mother and the child falling into the ice and drowning in the frozen river of the Ohio. She witnessed all this. She was a writer. The Beecher family was a well-known family. His father was Henry Ward Beecher, was a famous minister who preached about social justice in terms of the evil of slavery and what that was doing to this country. And that evil was argued with Douglas and Lincoln again and again and again, the Lincoln-Douglas debates. So when he announced that he was going to run against, I'm not sure who he was running against at that time, maybe it was Douglas. My ignorance on history is a little flabby right here, but nonetheless he split the parties and got the election. And then he announced that he was going to put an end to slavery. There was different arguments why he did what he did, that he was willing to send the slaves back to Africa and end it that way, all kinds of things. So the plantations could keep on cutting cotton any way they could. But nonetheless, he said, no, we're not going to do that. And he did the emancipation when he announced that the war was going to be around the corner, and the North and the South couldn't agree on how they would deal with that. So the party was split, the two parties were split. The Democrats became the dominant party, the Whigs became a nothing party, they died off, and the Republicans became the growing party of Lincoln. And so when the war was begun in 1860, and he announced the end of slavery, the Emancipation Proclamation, and I'm not going to get my dates exactly right on that, but it happened in that time frame. He basically told the South, you're not going to continue this business, you're not going to sell slaves anymore, even though it's a large business of $4 billion at that time. Think about that, $4 billion in 1860, what that would buy. Billion, not million, billion. And that's what was happening then. So when he spoke out against that, the single major business of the United States was selling slaves, buying and selling slaves, cotton and all the rest of it. That was the business of America that was on the international markets. And they were conjoined with England for the longest time up until England said no in 1948, or 1848. England said, we're not doing it, we're not selling slaves anymore. But the Americans kept on doing it and bringing in slaves. So when he did this, he went against all the traditions of business, bucked up against that. But the other thing he did, he announced the beginning of the Transcontinental Railroad. In his presidency, he completed that along with the telegraph. So from east to west, we now have a railroad under Lincoln. This is done in the space of 4 years or less. And as the war was going, the trains were delivering troops, all that sort of thing once the war started. But it was the railroad that helped that and made the North more powerful. They could get goods from the west and from the east and everywhere with the rail, besides boats and ships and things like that. So he does two things. He starts a war, a difficult war, that's basically going to split the nation, and he brings the country together again by winning the war, the North defeating the South. Very brutal war. I forget the total number of dead, but it was, I think, 500,000 dead in that vicinity. I probably wrong by a little bit, but nonetheless. But to call Trump equal to Lincoln is very strange. What has Trump done compared? Has he built a railroad, high-speed rail? Has he done anything with infrastructure? Not a bit, not anything, nothing. Did he talk about it? Yeah. Did he do it? No. You are what you do, folks, not what you talk about. And if you follow somebody who does just talk, then you're following Trump. And that's what's happening now. As I talked earlier in the previous show, you know what's going to happen to your dollar with the Chinese calling our debt. Boy, big times here. So when people like to compare Trump and Lincoln, they're smoking something. I'm not sure what it is. So the reality. Being an adult here is admitting when you're wrong. We might be mistaken, but when we're dead wrong and we insist on being wrong against what's obvious, then we're really in trouble. And how do we relate to our fellow man when the embarrassment gets too great? Turn around and shoot the guy for telling you what you don't want to hear? Is that what we're going to do? Are you going to say that, well, Trump's going to make the white man strong again? Obama took that away from us. Is that what you're going to say? Are those the arguments you're going to make? That white supremacy is necessary to save the white race? That's what some of the Trump followers say. That's really what they say. They're not really interested in America. They're interested in demeaning everybody that is not white. And that's what he's done. He's demeaned everybody. And he now has demeaned the truth so far down the pipe. And to go further and say he's equal to Lincoln is a laughable thing to do. And make a joke of yourself, to be the ultimate joker. Unfortunately, I thought the Joker had dark hair. Now I know it has red hair. So I want to thank you for this. So thank you so much.